FDR in New York City at about 7 p.m. October 6th, 2017, Friday. And I had just Manhattan Expressway, having started out on the West Side Highway, having assumed that would be much quicker on a night like tonight, and then had to go home and correct me, bring me back all the way to, I guess this is the east side, and going down the FDR is actually at an hour and 25 minutes, the fastest way between Inwood and Staten Island tonight. Surprising. There's plenty of red along the route, but still it's the fastest moving route. I'm not sure which way the navigation is going to take me towards the end, but typically doing the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel is the fastest thing. So you loop around the south point of Manhattan, come up on the other side, and then go down under the tunnel. That is, as opposed to the Brooklyn Bridge, or the many other bridges you could take to get over to the Brooklyn side, take the much cheaper Gowanus through the trenches to get to 278 and the Verrazano Bridge into Manhattan. So the tunnel is a similar route, but it puts you off after all that Brooklyn stuff, a lot closer to the Verrazano entrance. So I'm coming to a sort of a standstill here. So are the cars behind me. So I'm in a rather safe zone. Good time for a video. I was kind of thinking that when I started this. Very, very non-typical drive for me tonight. And I'm choosing this drive instead of driving into the city in the morning and finding a parking lot to leave my car in. It's a lot more stress to do that and to get to work on time and to put in a good day of work and, know that you have the stress of driving immediately upon you, again, without a time to decompress. So I actually like the train ride a little bit, especially when drives are involved. It's sort of a buffer zone between work where I am quite intense and driving, which is also quite intense, although it's becoming more and more natural to me here as I become, I guess, more of an actual citizen of New York City. So, yeah, today was a lot less fruitful than I had anticipated and expected, but isn't that the way in tech? I got to thinking that coding is just, in so many ways, just life. You talk to interact with people all the time, every day. You're encoding your thoughts into words. You're decoding their thoughts into ideas in your head, and you're encoding and decoding all the time in this continuous process to get through the day and interact with people. And then there's, of course, lots more I/O going on, like sight and all your other senses. So there's a tremendous amount of that whole sampling what's going on and making evaluations, making decisions, carrying out the decisions, and waiting for the feedback to come again so that that cycle continues. That's just life. That's the way everything is. And language plays a very important role. It's one of the most important tools that humans have in, doing stuff and rising above the high level mammal that we are. So some of the things about mammals and some other animals like birds is we're social. We work in groups. Of course, insects are social too. They work in vast swarms counted by the millions of ants in some colonies, whereas a human colony, or a tribe, if you will, has around 30 to 50 people, and that is what I believe, research is indicating, evolutionarily speaking, are geared towards. We're kind of like those bands of chimpanzees that Jane Goodall famously studied. And, chimps share so many traits in common with humans, and people like to say, throw labels on, what the dividing line is, and grab language all the time. Humans have language, chimps don't. Well, of course, now we know chimps and bonobos do have language of a sort, and it is generationally transmitted, transgenerational languages, the way they respond when it rains, the dances that they do. So the divisions between humans and other animals had been clear, distinct lines, language use, tool making. But, time after time, I think that was Jane Goodall's famous observation, the chimps used those shaped tools, sticks that had been stripped of the bark, to stick into termite mounds to pull out and eat the termites off of. Great source of protein, I'm sure. So tool making. So what do humans have left? It does seem that the main thing going for humans is more complex problem solving. It is not problem solving, it is not tool making, it is not language use, it is problem solving, tool making, and language use of a probably times 10 at least degree greater than any other animal can come close to, which allows things like self-awareness, visualization in your head. You carry in your head a very, very approximate abstract model of what you think the world and the universe around you is like. You're always running a simulation. That's how you anticipate. That's how you work ahead and make sure that you are where you need to be when the certain time arrives, even if a complex series of operations like driving in the FDR through rush hour is among those things you have to do. So I'm not complaining, I'm making observations, and I'm bringing it right back to that whole batch mode, to real time, to excess capacity. What is that story I've been telling? Now think of that in a fractal sense. You have batch mode to real time to looking ahead at a robot level, right? We'll be able to have robots eventually anticipating what might go wrong on the assembly line as they're doing things, and adapt, sort of knowing what's coming from a grandiose sampling of everything that has gone before, and recording it in such a way that it's actually useful in building algorithms around what you do when you encounter it again. Your sensory input indicates you're in a similar situation to something you have had to deal with before. What were your most successful outcomes before? And why not pattern based on that? And such is machine learning and eventually artificial intelligence, but such is the process by which we ourselves came to be here. What are we, if not organic, biological, trial and error, mutating, self-propagating, self-determined, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, computers. There was that famous sci-fi story, I forget what it was, some short story where they're listening to the signals coming from Earth, and they can't get over the fact that meat is transmitting these signals. That, no kidding, the sentient life form on this planet is made out of meat, which to every other, life form in the universe is the quaint grandfather species, if even that. I wonder if life could come into existence, skipping over the meat, all those Star Trek crystalline entity things. So we're odd, we're bubbles of water that could pop if the pressure got too little, or implode if the pressure gets too great. We're here at the exact level of atmospheres that the Earth's atmosphere provides by crushing down on us under its own weight in a gravity well. And so we're like swimming around in that sweet spot where, humans can live. And, we're mobile by pushing back against the surface and nearly toppling over from stilt to get around. And to communicate with each other, we take an organ that was made for taking in the oxygen we need so that the calories we consume can burn, because fire can't burn without oxygen, right? So we breathe. We require a gas out of the atmosphere that just isn't there naturally. I think some early sci-fi got it wrong when they looked at the gas composition of planets that don't have life and report oxygen. Oxygen comes from life. It comes from photosynthesis, and that whole, chlorophyll, converts. Where does it come from? Who pays for it? The sun does. Sun pays for anything. We got plenty of energy just streaming on in if we can only just grab it out of the air. And plants figured that out first. And so what is a plant? Picture a straw stuck into the ground, and from the bottom it's sucking in both water and minerals. And from the top there's a process whereby water is evaporating out through the leaves, so it's creating an upward flow, pulling the minerals and materials up through the straw, out through the end of the straw, and sort of overflowing. But the water brought it out there because energy of the sun was causing evaporation of the tiny bit of water at the top of the straw. No, you need to send out more surface area, fronds, if you will, like ferns was an early form of plant life on the surface, so that you could unfurl these fractal fingers and grab more of the delicious sunlight that, pulls out the water, brings up more of the materials. But this goopy material is just, pointless being drawn out. That would just be a mechanical process, something that a mechanical engineer could design into a system. But what if the mere even existence of that straw was from a process of converting matter into more fibrous material? So you just take the minerals that are coming in, the dirt, if you will, and you arrange it into sort of a cell wall that you can go up and out in these different directions and make these fronds. So now, why rely on evaporation and the motion of the water going up when all this sunlight that was just going into moving water could instead be somehow captured and preserved, and thus chlorophyll and that great mystery? And I think science is still figuring out how to just purely by light on some material convert that into the movement of electricity, of electrons through a material. So, who pays for it? The sun. You just unfurl your fractal fronds or whatever it is you have collecting your light, and you got energy to power your things. Then you need some sort of thing like batteries in order to save it for later and to get through the night when you don't have the sunlight. And that's plants, and plants come in these two forms, trees and grasses. And in other videos I discussed why grasses are winning when humans come into the equation, because so far we've only just been talking about plants. And I think you could totally get a planet covered with total green on all of its surface, on all of its land. Everything that's not ocean can be just forest and jungle and deep tree-like canopies, because without animals coming into the picture, trees probably win. When animals, and particularly humans, come into the picture, grasses win because we chop down trees because we can't think long term, and we want our wood and we want our fire and all that now within our lifetime. So deforestation, the pendulum swings both ways. The pendulum always swings both ways between, ice ages, even worse than ice ages, deep freezes from which we might never recover were it not for things like geothermal energies heating up and a few super volcanoes that block the sunlight and trap heat for a while, and suddenly you've got the great thaw and you can sort of reboot. And that happens. Now, you can't use it like the way the Republicans use it to deny science and to deny the preciousness of this vibrating edge state. Vibrating edges are in a lot of things, and it's sort of that boundary between the hot and the cold, the front between two different things where there's turmoil and complexity and interesting things happen and life arises. But with really simple things like colors, if you take a color and you take its opposite on the color wheel and put them side by side, green against red, yellow against purple, where the two meet and cancel each other out and neutralize each other, you will see a vibrating edge. It's just a little bit electric. It's just a little bit more active to the eye than one would think such a straight, hard line should be, and that's the vibrating edge. When you zoom down in on that vibrating edge, interesting things happen because you cannot go from one extreme on some system to the other extreme without going through the middle. I mean, yeah, quantum mechanics and all that, but when you get down to the scale of Planck's constant, pixels lose meaning. It becomes probability clouds. Pixels, you get to the pixels lose. I think I got that one wrong. The world starts to get pixelized when you get down to the scale of Planck's constant. You reach actually one of the physical limits of observation and measurement in the world that we know it, and the world gets pixelated. We sort of have that, size, that scale, at which if you tried to go any further, you have to make measurements in really wacky ways where things are, not here or there, but are in all places at once until you take the measurement and then it acquired. Well, you've probably heard it all before, the weirdness of quantum mechanics and the fact that things can affect each other at a distance when things are in a quantum entangled state. If the state changes over here, the state changes over here, even though there's nothing in between. Einstein didn't want to believe it, and they figured that if something was going to happen here, and it also happens here, that was predetermined and loaded by internal variables at the moment that condition was created. So, local hidden variables. But that's pretty much been disproven, and the universe is this crazy place where, at least at that tiny scale, trans-dimensional portals and things like them are actually possible. So Star Trek transporters and portals a la all the cartoons these days, maybe, I don't know, probably not my lifetime. So and when you go big, there's one of those limits too. It's called the speed of light, and all these beliefs that if you go in a straight direction long enough, you eventually will wrap around the universe and end up back home. Just like you're on the surface of the planet, and if you go far enough around, you come back where you started. Curious, no? And the role that gravity plays in all of this, the force that somehow continues to defy unification, at least provably, superstring theory and supersymmetry, whatever that is, has unified it, saying that, as Michio Kaku would put it, is that the universe is music, vibrations, and things being plinked, and all these strings vibrate in different ways, and potentially membranes vibrate in different ways, and the way they intersect and cross over with each other and wrap up upon themselves, and creates all the different particles, all of them, the things that seem to defy measurement. They're so small, things like electrons and bosons, versus the much larger things that we seem to be able to just move around and sort of assemble like factories with protons and neutrons. Actually, I'm not sure we're moving around the protons and the neutrons yet like that, but we're certainly doing the whole atoms. Once you get a stable one with the valence electron and stuff, we're moving those around, and in the labs at least, spelling out IBM, and that was like 15 years ago. I think we're making like little micro machines and stuff now. So with our ability to build things at that microscopic molecular level, and the fact we can already see processes that do that called life, that do it all around us, providing infinitely different examples to observe and hack and emulate and get the best parts of, and see, oh, nature did it this way here with humans, and this is how we're going to do it now with programmed machines. That's the age we're going into. I heard a guy talk, his last name was Moran Cerf, who bills himself as a neurohacker, which is basically figuring this stuff out, because by looking at nature and human brains and doing experiments, you can map things out. When I give it this input, I get this output, and eventually reduce to quantifiable things, stuff we never thought we would. And this line of reasoning leads to Ray Kurzweil, one of the people who pioneered optical character recognition and is now one of the, I think, fellows at Google. I'm not sure of all these words, but they help plan things out for Google, because you see and you feel these machine learning things coming into effect. I can judge how much of the experimental machine learning stuff is reaching Google's everyday products by my intuitive changing trust of things like Google Maps. I checked Google Maps. It tried to take me on the FDR on a Friday night, and I'm like, what? No, and it didn't give any alternative routes. So I, like a moron, tried to go to the West Side Highway, and it was like back-to-back traffic. Luckily, I could cut over and take the Cross Manhattan Expressway, and essentially I-95, I think, and get back onto the FDR, and I'm moving. This might be red, but I'm moving. And so Google knew better, and it won't give alternative routes. This is the way to take tonight, and Google tried to assert that to me tonight by not giving alternative routes. And I, like a moron, like one other time I did recently, ignored Google's advice and tried to do it the way I knew must be better from my experience here. But it's getting to the point where Google's experiences from being tied into Google Maps and having this whole feedback loop and essentially being able to see and observe traffic is getting to know a thing or two. And this machine learning, deep learning, I think, is one of the terms they throw out there, when the data is just so copious that it really does rival the process of what goes on with humans growing up, with the sensory input that's provided by eyes and touch and taste and smell and mobility and balance and all those things that humans have as biological sensors from when? From conception? From when cells build themselves into the smallest sensors as we evolve. And in the fetus, you see evolution play out, going through the creatures we very likely evolved from, looking something like a tadpole and going through the whole amphibian-looking thing, and eventually becoming what we know of as that big-eyed, cute baby, passing through reptiles on the way, and then become that very recognizable, unbelievably cute, hairy, furry mammal thing. And less hair than many of our mammal fellows on Earth. I want to say brothers and sisters. I'm trying to get that gender-specific terminology out of my language. Even man-made, I got stuck on. So do you use the, woefully gender-specific language and promote, a bias against the one offspring I'm bringing into this world, Addie? Or do you try and expose her to a better way, that this is humankind and things are human-made? Or does that bring too much awareness to it? Does it not flow? So I think every generation reinvents, a certain amount of, our coding, what matters. And that is happening around us every day. We're clearly going through a phase where Channel 3, 6, and 10, growing up for me, CBS, NBC, and ABC, not respectively, not in that order. They switched at one point. It really confused me, and I stopped caring at the point they switched. Represented roughly Westinghouse, General Electric, and the remaining free media. And between them, they controlled what aired, what programs were produced, what commercials played in between, and that was called the post-World War II economy in the 1950s. Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best and all that happy stuff. Set a certain level of expectations and programmed a generation. Ticky-tacky houses, suburban sprawl, giving up public transportation for cars, and the de-urbanization of America, and called that good. Every person's house is their castle, but now you got to mow the lawn and you got to compete with the Joneses, and everything became very, very game-like, clear games, clear rules, hierarchy, pedigrees, who you know being more important than what you know, again because of hierarchies, and faithfully carrying out orders and instructions, and centralized control. Vulnerability. Wherever you have centralized systems, you have vulnerability to problems at the top. You trust an awful lot in the things at the top of the hierarchy. And so stuff like democracy that provides peaceful revolution every 2 to 4 years, every 2 to 4 to 8 years really, is part of a solution, but these are these 80-20 rule Band-Aid solutions, things that provide a release valve so that you recalibrate the system before it reaches volatility and explosion in the extremes, because of course the pendulum swings both ways. Oscillation is very important in systems. Systems are never in a static state. Systems are in a dynamic state. That means it's moving from one state to another, and then maybe back again in some cyclical form with some feedback loops, so that the system has some ability to sustain change. When little variations occur, it can bring you back to center. Yet, even though the system has some natural boundaries at each edge, there's calculus there, because what are the boundaries? Things can always go at half their speed when they slow down before the return. So do they ever really stop, and do they ever really swing back? Well, of course they do. And the fact that they do tells us a lot about the universe and the people who try and trick you into bad thinking. I think, is it Archimedes' paradox or the tortoise and the hare paradox? There's one of these paradoxes that says you can always go half the distance closer to where you're going, so you will never really reach there. Well, at some point you reach the scale of, it doesn't even reach Planck's constant. Electron fields interfere with each other, and you're given the illusion of reaching and touch, which doesn't really exist. But even if it were with very, very fine instruments at a very small scale, you reach the level of 1 unit of Planck's constant being between you and where you're going. So now, any further that you go, you're probably there. Quantized states. So, systems. you can either view them as a sine wave in their oscillation or as a circular arrow. Probably a sine wave is better because it accepts the existence of something like time and travel and true beginnings and ends. Yet somehow things do end up circular. So this, whether the thing is closed at the end or open, and whether it'll oscillate in exactly the same pattern going around another cycle, these are the important questions in, whether human free will exists. I think the Futurama episode where they invent a time machine, and for the most trivial thing, they go forward in time 5 minutes, and it turns out being stuck and whatever. Yeah, they have to go around the whole thing again and again, and they make a joke out of even that. And that brings to mind the biggest observations and the biggest jokes and the biggest, insights into God's mind that repeatedly occurs in such things as Futurama, and more recently, Rick and Morty. So, wow, the world we're going into. I made an observation with one of my friends at work today where he made a generalization about things are becoming more of a certain way, and I was like, yes, and they're all also becoming more of this other way at the same thing too. And there's as much people and more in that other way than there ever were in history. The number of people opposing Trump and the number of people who you say he's got to be impeached and he's got to be out of there and he's already broken laws are just as large and just as vocal as the group who was saying that Obama was not really born in the United States and he was not really a citizen, and that the socialization of medicine and government was out of hand, and corporate and corruption was was ruling, and they were just handing things back between the Obamas and the Clintons, and we'd have another empire, whatever. So, it's always the same. You go back at how vicious politics were in the past, it's always been this bad. The only thing that makes it different, and not even that different from recently, is nukes and other technologies that are part of the picture, where radicalism and extremism could end it all forever for everyone, permanently. And that's not good, but neither is it new. Cuban Missile Crisis, it's gotten even scarier than it is now. So, some nasty stuff in the hands of smaller governments. Government scale resources is sufficient to do all kinds of nasties. Look at the, cornucopia of ways that it could all be ended. Or the existence book. I forgot, David Brin. So anyway, reading a lot of sci-fi, and all these ideas are always woven seamlessly throughout. These books that have been around forever and will be around forever, and explore and push the edges of these mental thought exercises. And for anyone who thinks that the thought exercises of science fiction is not worth it, I give to you Albert Einstein, who said that, all his big breakthroughs started out with thought exercises. Trains, moving relative to people, and sound waves coming out from them, and guesses made based on those mental experiments. And a lot of science is in bridging the distance, the stuff between the intuitive leaps of the mental experiments and predictable, reliable things that can be turned into technology. And so to bring this thing full circle, because, it's all about full circle, in the end, it's about life, and it's about human consciousness, because it's the best intelligence we have to look at right now, as far as, things like us. If we want something to talk to, it's human intelligence that we look at, which is all this prefrontal cortex stuff, which is because we're these social animals that got caught in a feedback loop of some sort that drove our brains bigger. And we use that to exist in much larger organizational structures and civilizations, and we use it to make much larger accomplishments than one generation or 5 generations alone could do. We're doing things that, we hope are permanent progress for humanity. And if not, we're encoding it into glass that will exist longer than the universe, so that things can be rebooted by us or others like it when they unearth our archives. So, we'd have DNA banks held in, Norwegian vaults. Anyway, every variation of the practical and the impractical has been thought of, has been played out many, many a times, and all we're doing right now, is going through the motions of one of those probability clouds that has the privilege of being realized as reality right now. And I could ramble on, but you get the idea. What is the value in things? Well, I don't know, but I think life is unlikely enough that the value in it is exactly what we're doing. As long as we don't destroy ourselves, as long as we get through the filter events, we're doing precisely what life is intended to do. We should probably have a cautious eye towards the oscillating systems so that we don't destroy ourselves, so that the cycle that oscillates is between states of humanity rather than states of intelligent life existing on this planet, or life at all in a higher form, and none. That's the snowball. That's the deep freeze to the great thaw, to the volcanoes and, tectonic activity and warming up and reaching a sweet zone, a Goldilocks zone like we're in, where there's seasons, 4 seasons, 2 of them mild, and, a Gulf Stream and all this really precious snapshot in time things, because there are no static states. We are always in transition. The question is how much you value states of those transitions, and how much do you want to document it, and how much do you want to just live in the moment and enjoy it? How much do you want to do for future generations, and how much do you want to do for self? These are the questions that I will not answer or delve into any further, because I see that I'm coming up on 40 minutes, and I know both between the storage of my phone and the 45-minute cutoff limit of iPhone and YouTube or whatever, I would be wise to wrap things up here. And if I were to give parting words, it would be this entire discussion was stimulated by the fact that even though I'm at a crawl in traffic, it's in one of the greatest cities in the world, and I'm getting through it as fast as I can, thanks to the rising intelligence on this planet that is Google. And that is just one of many examples of where this is going to happen in places large and small, commercial and free and open source, and all the rest of it. There's just more of everything. And as there's more of everything, there's more dangers to be looked out for. And, some people will take it upon themselves to be the police. And government is going to have to play a significant role in that. And we have to strike that balance. We have to make sure that we're allowed to oscillate enough to be a healthy, stable system, but not oscillate so much that we wipe ourselves out. That's it. Get through the filter events. Humanity won. A few of us will become immortal, upload our brains, whatever. Most of us won't. The future is here. It's not distributed evenly, but we can at least all talk about it and try and make this stuff that either sci-fi readers or really futurist get to revel in and enjoy all the time, and bring that to maybe a different kind of audience here on the YouTube. So hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for joining me, and hope to talk to you again soon.